right, welcome to our Mochi Podcast, the only podcast rated R for Robin. I'm Robin. I'm back. And the last four podcasts were covered by Ariana, and today my guest is Constantin Kostenko. If I hope I'm saying that right. Constantin is the NFT solutions executive for Consensys. You live in Virginia. Thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Always love to be part of the Mochi conversations.
Yeah. So, how did you get into Mochi? Were you part of one of the original alpha or beta batches?
I am part of batch number 1,
and
I always admired the spirit with which Mochi was founded back in the early Consensys days.
Mm-hmm.
I had some of the early literature, paraphernalia, and different
the cult materials.
Yeah, different cult materials of sorts that I enjoyed kind of reading, and I really loved the spirit that was really embodied in kind of the movement of what I think we called dark Slack at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of the counterculture within the what may appear to be a movement towards a corporate structuring. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a very good magnetic force that countered and really encouraged different kinds of conversations that otherwise would not have been happening,
Mm-hmm.
and enabling perhaps some voices have been silenced otherwise. So I have always admired it, and sometime later I just learned that there's this Mochi Club, and I had an opportunity to join. And
so I take it you're friends with pretty much everybody else who was who is at Consensys, or it was ex Consensys.
It's a funny story here is that I was not entirely friends because I joined Consensys part of the what we call the solutions group. I guess it was enterprise group
Mm-hmm.
at the time. So I was part of the group what may have been labeled as the evil empire that's coming in to take over and do the evil things. Consensys. So frankly, I may have been inadvertently labeled as one of them who's trying to sell oil and other nefarious things,
Mm-hmm.
and Web3 revolutions are going to happen. So was it friends? No, but I had always an opportunity to have good interactions with people, and it doesn't matter of what people thought early on, but kind of the spirit was there. It doesn't matter what side you're on.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of journeys do you generally do within Mochi? What kind of goals are have you been aiming for?
Yeah, so various goals. One, I think I started my journey by trying to get back into exercise world, so that was
Mm-hmm.
immensely helpful. I think my other and I switched different teams as I was going through the process. Others were working, I think, also health related items. So that was my first journey. My next journey was about meditation,
Mm-hmm.
learning, kind of getting back to meditation, having this routine, being mindful of doing this in repeatable basis. And I think then my next journey was, I think maybe an exercise one. And then the last one was the journey where we tried to learn about the fermentation.
Yeah. So was that part of the Leaf Club, the Leaf Cup thing?
Yes, that was my last one. That was my last journey, a Leaf Cup of, we worked on the fermentation and experimenting, doing different things. And
whose idea was that fermentation stuff? Because the team was you and Tyler. I don't remember who else was on the team.
I don't know how that came about. I just read a book or started looking to getting a book, and I think everybody else was excited about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It just turned out that everybody on the team had ideas about fermentation, different things of fermentation. So,
Mm-hmm.
And I fermented things in the past, but not to the same level of kind of the Tyler and went to kind of experimenting. We did some unique experimentation. Some things did not work out, but it was definitely fun trying stuff out, and actually having a good book to go along with it. That actually took it to the next level.
Yeah, pickling stuff is so my wife has done a bit of it. Well, she's been making Korean style pickled cabbage, pickled carrots. We haven't tried kimchi yet. We feel there's a little bit more ingredients to it, but pickling is awesome.
Yeah. Well, so pickling is when you okay. There's pickling and there's also like pure fermentation. So fermentation process is a bit different from pickling,
Hmm.
as we now know. Is that you don't actually use you just let the natural bacteria form. You can of
Hmm.
course buy bacteria to add versus using vinegar, which is traditional, which you use for pickling.
Hmm.
So two different approaches, two different methodologies, and our group actually focused on fermentation, pure fermentation,
Hmm.
uh, letting natural bacteria take over. You can add different things to it, and also try to time it of when, uh, yeah, when good things happen to the, I guess, fruit or veggies.
Hmm. Yeah. For the, I was in a team. I've been in the same team since I started. I think a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. He was my friend from college, and we did a short story. Like we were going back and forth, taking turns writing, like every other week. And man, I was really disappointed to find out that he was a much better writer than me.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what kind of things have you been pickling recently?
We've kind of gotten away with it, but gotten away from it. Again, we try to do like cabbage, carrots. I'd love to try like making like pickled eggs because I love hard boiled eggs. And
Oh yeah.
um, my wife's grandma, she did a lot of like pickled tomatoes. She makes all of her like own jams and preserves and stuff. Um,
Once in a while, I get this urge to get a pickled tomato,
mhm.
and you go to Eastern European grocery store, and yeah, you just get that. Right? It's unique. You can't. I never seen it produced in the United States, and
Well,
then
it's
you can tell.
because in the U.S. we only like when you say pickle, it only means like a pickled cucumber.
Yeah.
Like when I first heard like pickled gherkins, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
You
Right.
said pickle. It means a pickle.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's a whole thing, right? It's a whole process of the fermentation and different things you can do with
Mhm. Yeah, you'd
it.
think it
Anyway.
would be a little bit more like widespread in the U.S. Like the different kinds of pickles, just given the kind of like a lot of like ethnic backgrounds and food cultures, you'd think that pickling would or pickled other vegetables and fruits and whatever would be more everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, you have to reflect, I think, on kind of the culture of US and kind of mass production. And
Hmm.
this is what I think makes Mochi so unique is that we can find these kind of small subcultures, mini cultures in different channels, and you can find people who have these different, interesting, unique aspects. And this is really what really attracted me to Mochi, I think, early on,
Hmm.
is that you can find people, you can find ideas that are maybe like as a Dogfish Brewery likes to say, like off-centered, right? And off-center does not necessarily mean the bad. It simply
Hmm.
means it's a different way of looking at it. And so I think this culture, talking about this pickling culture, it exists in some small examples. You can see it, of course, in Korean. You can see it in some maybe Indian
Hmm.
cultures and certainly Greek, but it's also very limited. It's also very Americanized. Only
Yeah.
if you go to a real Korean restaurant where you look in the menu and there is 10 different samples of kimchi, you're like, wow,
Oh,
right?
I love like going for like Korean barbecue, and they would bring out like a whole spread of different like
Right.
side things. Oh,
Yeah,
miss that
exactly.
shit.
And you can go like different spices, different types, different things being pickled. And so yeah, to I think American culture in general is really tailored towards this kind of mass produced, mass everything. It's
Hmm.
almost you go to the grocery store, well no, you see it's like you want an apple? Okay, sure, pick red, yellow, or green. Right? You want a pepper? We make only two types. Red, yellow, and green.
But I
And so
think, I mean, like
not even
but like pickled vegetables and stuff, there's such a wide variety, and like and because of like the pickling process, the stuff doesn't go bad. It's got a good shelf life. It should be just like easy to sell. I think it's because Americans, I think by and large, are not used to having complex flavors by as like the standard. You know, it's got to be like straight salty, or it's got to be like straight sweet or meaty, and there's not like a lot of the intermingling in just like the what we I guess we'd call like a standard American a standard American diet.
yeah, I think that's probably a true characterization. It's changing. I think as people experiment in different cities like
Hmm.
Austin, for example, Texas, and others, and this is the beauty of food trucks, right? Food trucks can experiment with these almost like experiment with different
Hmm.
cultures and ideas, and then either find a niche in the area, or if they find something that actually caters to the wider taste of Americans and they can expand. There's many success stories I see here in the art in kind of Washington D.C. area where ideas started as food trucks and then they expand into little restaurants
Hmm.
and then maybe multiple locations like primarily I would say Latin American cuisine kind of has gotten the traction,
Hmm.
and you can actually taste the difference in the tacos that they produce versus what you get like I don't know kind of in generic places.
Hmm. I've seen taco places in Ukraine, which I'm excited for, but I've yet to try because they're like way more expensive. But like, in order to get that to take off, you kind of there's gotta be some people willing to spend, that much for the thing. So I need to just suck it up and try it out.
Yeah, it's true. Some of the interesting, some Ukrainian cuisine is interesting because they borrow some things and some things they do right, some things they don't do right.
Hmm.
Like I don't think it's even right to export or rather import Corona beer into Ukraine, but they do it, right? Like why do we bring Corona?
Hmm.
It's like well, just because say we have it, and then sometimes they do foods right, and other times they don't. And sometimes simple lack of experience. I've been to restaurants in Ukraine many years ago. I'm sure things have changed, where they would serve a avocado in a salad, but avocado would be like hard as I don't know as a piece of wood.
Uh-huh. So
Like
it's just like a
nobody
really
eats it.
unripe avocado.
Yeah, really unripe. And they're like, well, it's in our menu. And instead of taking an item off the menu, they're like, well, we're just gonna cut it. And then like looks okay to me. I guess people like it.
Hmm.
So it's over time. I think cultures start to really like understand how certain foods should be. And mind you, this was like a decade ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but it's like people like start to learn about adopting different cultures. So same may be true for like really fine Latin American cuisine as well,
Hmm.
Mexican tacos.
Yeah, I think definitely with the takeoff of like YouTube and like cooking creators are like spreading a lot of different kinds of cuisine, and they're trying to do it like authentic. It's not just about aesthetics. Kind of like the same way that the decade before it was still like travel cooking TV shows or travel like dining TV shows with like Anthony Bourdain, Andrew Zimmern. I think that really started trying out different foods and trying complex flavors and stuff. I think that's where it's starting to get off. And now, like, it is very much like an aesthetic, like, cool thing for people to just kind of know how to cook. I think the only thing I'm kind of I don't know where I stand on it. It's just kind of how sometimes some of the food it comes off as like really bougie, or if it's like if it's kind of like it feels kind of classist in a way some of the videos are produced. But I think more people are cooking, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it goes both ways. So uh, for me, I actually do a lot of watching. I cannot say a lot, but I do watch
Uh-huh.
the video blogs for different Ukrainian foods that I
Hmm.
want to cook. For example, like pirozhki, for example, you can't buy good pirozhki here, and to bake pirozhki that's good. Pirozhki is a little for those who don't know, it's like a little stuffed. Um, it's like it could be meat, vegetables stuffed inside of a roll and then baked.
Hmm.
And yeah, to make a good pirozhki, you got to get the right dough, and to use the right dough, you got to experiment with it. And so I often spend some time on YouTube channels
Hmm.
try to figure out what's a good recipe. And of course, in my case, instead of just sticking with something that works, I don't bookmark it, and then just next time I Google search again and try something new. Try something
Hmm.
new. So it's interesting to see what's kind of the power of YouTube that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
culture and the tasty notes from you know uh, one country gets transported to another country where you can do things. And in many cases, you also get translations. There is a website called Natasha's Kitchen, and I think she's an immigrant from Ukraine. Well, she's not an immigrant; her parents immigrated somewhere out Midwest, and she built her business, YouTube blogger business, where you go in and you get recipes, really good recipes in English for Eastern
Natasha's
European
Kitchen, you
cuisine.
said?
Yeah, if you just Google Natasha's Kitchen, and you'll come up with pretty good recipes, including plov, which is a
Turkish?
traditionally. I'm sorry.
Is that I know I've had plenty of plov here. Is plov Turkish originally?
Well, I'm sure be many. It would be many countries claiming to have claim to plov. I think it's probably Kazakh national dish.
Mm.
But yeah, this is the site, and so she has a good plov recipe for instant pot.
Ooh, like
And
a crock pot?
Yeah, like a crock pot. Well, it's actually instant pot. It does require because in Ukraine they call them steam pot. What do you call it? Steam
Like a rice
makers.
cooker?
Yeah, like a rice cooker kind of thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. A pressure cooker. That's what it is. Pressure cooker.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. This is a good one. And for those who don't like meat, I cook this one without meat. I'd love, anyway, it's a good recipe. There's a lot of like you mentioned, like Robin. There's a lot of like artistry is going in, a lot of show. By the time you get to the recipe, you have to
Hmm.
read through about 5 pages of like
Yeah.
the feelings the author has, and then you get to the recipe. It's like, oh my god, just tell me the quantity and the temperature. That's all I
Yeah,
want.
they really need more cooking websites need to have that at like the top. But I think like for readership or viewership statistics or whatever, they need to have it at the bottom. So it's like, oh, they scrolled down and read this stuff.
Yeah, the only tip I would offer to folks who do brave and actually try to get to, let's say, YouTube's from Eastern Europe where it's not in English, is that sometimes you will get the answer of cook in the oven until done. Sometimes I don't even give you the temperature. They assume you know the temperature and they assume you'll know when it's done.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes, so for an American audience, it's like I don't understand what it means, right? Like, what do you mean done? So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cooking, like I think that before I started cooking, and same thing with like before I started, so I bake sourdough bread and stuff. Before you get into it, it's very daunting and like it seems very like formulaic. It needs to be like an exact measurement. It needs to be
yeah,
exact. But really, like cooking and even baking to an extent is a lot of it's like feel and kind of getting a sense of like whether or not, oh, the dough's going to be good today, or the but I think for baking, it's like it's very special. Like, oh, what's the temperature? What's the humidity of the room? Uh, every oven is different in its own way.
100%.
So, like, I think getting over that first hurdle for trying to cook new stuff is always like the most intimidating thing.
Have you baked your bread in the cast iron? Cast iron.
So I
Container?
don't have a lid for my cast irons. So I got a cast iron frying pan, but it doesn't have a lid, and so I've used it once for that, and it turned out pretty well.
Okay, yeah, that's usually our default cast iron. What do you call that? Um, Pot, cast iron pot. And
Hmm.
then because we broke our lid, we actually now use a cast iron um, frying pan to cover it up for the
Hmm.
first 20 minutes, and then you remove it and then you let it rise. And so that is our go-to method for baking in the oven. Usually reserved for the winter months, so you don't overheat the house in summertime.
Yeah. I remember, so I lived in China before I lived in Ukraine, and uh, buildings in Ukraine in southern China are not built with insulation. They're not built for cold weather, but it still does get cold there. And so, like during the winter, I had like a small not microwave oven, but like I had a mini oven, and I would just like turn the thing on and open the oven for heating.
Yeah, that's what we call Soviet style climate control. For the old buildings, they would have no controls for the heat. It's either on or it's off. And so when
Hmm.
it gets too hot, people just open the window and let the heat out if it's too hot.
Yeah, even
It's
for our apartment here, it's like the whole apartment or the whole apartment building, the heating only goes on after it's been below 10 degrees Celsius for I think like 3 days in a row. Otherwise, it doesn't turn on.
yeah.
So it's just kind of annoying and
It's a,
freezing
it's
for
it's
two
a, it's
days.
a Soviet style centralized economy
Hmm.
type of setup. Well, luckily, most of the buildings are starting to get retrofitted with all the new buildings certainly have their own structures, but certainly a lot of old infrastructure.
There's one cook. I also want to. Have you heard of this guy? Yevgen Klopotenko.
I have not.
He's supposed to be like the Ukrainian Gordon Ramsay. My wife uses his borscht recipe, and it's super good.
That's nice. I will definitely give it a go. Oh wow, looks delicious already.
Yeah, I think this guy he partly led the charge. I don't know how many years ago for like reclaiming borscht as a Ukrainian dish because everybody associates it with like Russia, and there's always that fighting between like Russians and Ukrainians about oh who our borscht is better, and There's like the Ukrainian joke that like, oh, Russian borscht is what Ukrainians use to wash their, like the pots.
I never heard of that joke. I can certainly see the relevance of the joke. I don't think there's any argument about Ukrainians being kind of the leads for the borscht. There's no question about that. It's not even an argument. And frankly, everybody has their own borscht. There's no like
Hmm.
the borscht recipe. Everybody has their own. And so for folks who hopefully will visit Ukraine in the near future, I highly recommend like everywhere you go to just get at least a cup of borscht just to try
Hmm.
it because everywhere you go is going to be different. Which is it's like also like a staple. It's how you judge the locality and the restaurant by the quality of the borscht they make and serve you.
Hmm. So you're from Kiev. Were you originally born in Kiev, or were you from like a nearby village?
No, I was originally born in Kiev. Yep, central Kiev.
Hmm. And what year did you move to the States?
I moved to the States around 1993, I
Hmm.
believe.
So shortly after like the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, fall of Soviet Union happened. I think I may have moved towards the very end of 1993. Soviet Union fell apart, and then yeah, and then opportunity came up to move here
Hmm.
on a temporary basis, and did
Were
not
you
need to stay. And
were you
then
moving
I
for
ended up.
work or?
I didn't really come here. I was so young. I was very young when I came, and I was so really my parents took me here.
Mm.
So I didn't really have. I was in middle school at the time when I arrived,
Hmm.
and so the plan was to stay for 2 years, and then we ended up staying for much longer.
Hmm.
So here we are.
What part of the States did you originally move to?
I have landed in Virginia originally, and lived here for a bit, then a bit in Maryland, then back to Virginia. Went to undergrad in Maryland, graduate school in Pittsburgh,
So you've been
Pennsylvania.
hanging out
So
around the Northeast, New England.
yeah, stick around here. Yeah, exactly. So this kind of Washington D.C. area is really my home.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's kind of I don't know. It's a good balance. It's a good balanced place to be. I would say in general.
Yeah, especially if you like to like protest. It's like the best place to hang out.
Yeah, protests are good. It's certainly a very vibrant area for sure. It's can grind your gears if you're heading to DC to a museum and then streets are closed because of a run or a marathon or a protest or something else.
Hmm.
But it also represents it's a great place to be because America comes to you versus you go to America.
Hmm.
So especially summertime from spring till early fall, you could see people from all walks of life coming to DC to visit. And even just if you sit on the bench in the National Mall and just see the breadth of America
Hmm.
as it exists, they come to visit uh, the museums. And in America, everybody visits museums. It's just what you do. It's not even like
Oh yeah, museums are awesome in the U.S.
yeah, museums are great, but it's also there's no this attachment of kind of elitism because museums are free. It's in
Hmm.
US and it's like everybody feels the need to if you go to DC you have to go to museums. So if you can observe the people who go, you can kind of glean a lot about America,
Hmm.
what people do, how they act, what they say, what they not say, how they talk with their kids, how they talk with each other. Obviously, can't read a whole lot into this, but it's still fun. It's still
Hmm.
fun to see, to observe
Yeah,
from a human perspective.
I was in DC for a few days a couple years ago. I was visiting a friend who's going to George Washington University. Got to visit the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, like one thing that's awesome about the Smithsonian is like everything that they have on display, they also have up online for like virtual tour for anybody to go on for free. They give access to like all of the libraries and like every single thing and I think they've also I don't know if it was recent or if it's always been this way, but like they give like free access, common use to anybody for whatever purpose, to like create new music, to sample art, anything in like the and that's awesome. That's what like educating everybody is supposed to be about.
Yeah, it's true. I was at Smithsonian National Gallery of Art. I believe like one of the buildings just 2, 3 weeks ago.
Mm.
It can be overwhelming. And you're right, they actually now have an ability for you to have a map, like a Google Maps, where you
Hmm.
walk in, it maps the location of where you are, and you can locate where you are, and then you can also learn about specific artworks, right?
Hmm.
As you kind of go through and you learn about it. It's really it's fun. I'm really happy to see this kind of interchange between the new tech and the art from from 13th, 14th centuries, 15th centuries, you name it, right? And then you
Hmm.
can kind of enjoy it, you can absorb it, you can see it. And I think the fact that they made it digital, it's interesting. Experiencing it, like, it detracts, it takes away from the attention of
Hmm.
what of your experience, because it's using a phone. It certainly takes away from experience being there. But at the same time, the trade-off here is that you actually get to learn and understand the meaning of the presentation,
Yeah, you don't have to
which
just
you
look at the like
normally not
the
get from
tiny
a guide.
card.
Yeah, right. The card is not enough. It tells you the context, maybe cultural relevance. I remember seeing one of the portraits. I forgot the name of the queen, English queen, and there was like a picture of a monkey, like on her shoulder, and it explains, well, why is monkey there? It says, like, well, normal during 17th century, it said that monkeys represent that the person being shown in the portrait is like a fool, in essence. But in case of her, English queen, it was a representation of these exotic animals and this kind of wealth, and a way to show off that you're different than others, right? So without understanding, you just like, oh, there's a monkey, okay, weird. But now you understand the cultural significance of the monkey, kind of as a pet monkey next to child, next to the queen. It's really interesting to see
About
that kind of education.
this one.
There's no way you're gonna find
Oh,
it.
damn it.
So that's a good example, right? So that's a good example of another queen. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't know
remember
if I'll
the.
be able. I'll probably not be able to find it on time.
It's a bit of a bit of an enigma.
Yeah, there are some like professions in the U.S. that I really that are doing what they're supposed to do and like with the passion that you would kind of hope for.
Mhm.
Like museum curators in national museums, a lot of like park rangers, like they genuinely care about everything that's going on in the forest. Librarians, like they know like what resources you can get wherever, what books to get, what you can use for book reports and stuff. And like I'm glad that none of these are ever part of like the chopping block. I mean, in some cases there are, but they aren't controversial in the same way that like public educators and unions and stuff are oftentimes like brought up as like boogeymen for socialism or whatever.
Yeah, it's obviously underappreciated uh, part, I think, of America, of how much goodness the government actually does
Hmm.
for public good. And being an immigrant, it's really interesting how I often have these conversations with my wife. Uh, in that it feels that in America, this American dream,
Is
right?
is
It's
your
like,
wife from the U.S.?
yes, yes, she's from US.
Uh-huh.
And my perspective as an immigrant, even though I've been here for a long time, is that with all this access that we have, like you mentioned, to the museums, to the libraries, to everything, um, it's it does require energy, and it does require some resources. But in general, like, accessibility
Hmm.
is there to nature, to like you mentioned, to like fantastic parks, to like reserve a cabin, like was a bunch of guys would go to national park, and I think it cost $50, maybe it's $40, maybe even $35 to reserve a cabin for four people.
Hmm.
And so the entrance is free. You get the cabin for $35 or so, and you can enjoy national park, right? Like somewhere not too far. And same goes for libraries. I mean, I remember being a kid, being amazed coming into US and seeing just the richness of museums all available for free.
Hmm.
Like the Museum of National History, just the stuff. Even like being a kid then, I didn't own like a computer. I could go in and just like have my fingers go on the keyboard. I know it sounds so trivial now, but at the time it was like,
Oh,
yeah, this is what
yeah, I
fingers.
remember like having wanted to go to the library to just like play on the computer as much as I could. Uh, I got my
Yeah,
I got my
exactly.
Yu-Gi-Oh
Yeah.
cards stolen at one of the tables.
Well, right, right. So like this same here, right? So like even computers, that's a very good point. The libraries were the first place where if you could not own the computer, you can go at least try and learn them on,
Hmm.
try to do things on it. I mean, and of course, even back then, they have like a telnet, and they would block things off. But at that time, security system were not all that fantastic. So if you kind of if you
If you
use
learned enough
term,
with the computer for free, then you could do whatever you want.
well, you know what I would normally do, kind of geeking out a little bit, I would find a catalog, library catalog computer, and mind you, this was back in the day, it was the green screens kind of thing, so it's like
Hmm.
really old. And then I would, navigate the menus, and eventually, like you get to the menu where it'd be something like not library related, and you continue exploring different like, and then you looked up a little bit like other websites, or even using different other protocols like FTP protocols, and one thing leads to another, and then you can be in a chat room somewhere, you could be doing a Google search. Well, there was no Google at the time, but you could do like web searches,
Hmm.
and it was all text based, it was very budget, right? But it was sufficient. Plus you get to experiment with, just like, try new things, right?
Hmm.
And it was libraries that made it available, the libraries made it possible.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that like me, my siblings, my brother especially like to do was just like go to the library and just like print out like like Google search or Yahoo search pictures and just like print out the pictures to like put in their binders as like a decoration. Or my brother liked to draw, I like to draw too, and just like use it as like reference for art practice. And it's awesome.
Yeah, so bottom line, I think the resources we have available in us, and like you said, they're now becoming more and more available online
Hmm.
for anybody and everybody to use. Is that kind of, with the right direction, encouragement? I think the opportunity, call it American dream or whatever you want to call it, I think it's just being a good, I don't know, good society, is the openness of information we have,
Hmm.
versus censorship resistance, is I think is amazing.
Yeah, I
It's
definitely think
it's
it is like core to being an ethical society, being like willing to share information to like people regardless of where your economic standing is.
Yeah, and this is why, like, these kind of, we hear conversations about these now prohibited book lists, and certain states trying to block off certain
Why is
books from
that
being.
happening now? I'm so like not plugged into American politics anymore. Like
Why is
why?
this happening? I can't explain why it's happening.
Uh huh.
The feeling I have is that people need to have a cause,
Hmm.
right? And then they make cause just to create chaos, and create chaos is, you need the energy, and you can capitalize and weaponize the energy if you need to. And so, kind of from the heart, I think they should be weaponizing frustration against the environment, right, or lack of action in the environment, and other
Hmm.
things you can be really upset about, and then channel positivity. And yet people find other ways of creating chaos, right? Or like,
Yeah,
it makes no sense
I, I
whatsoever.
I very like genuinely wonder about like how much there is like because there definitely are campaigns out there to just kind of like confound and screw with people to muddy the waters and to make it so that people aren't effective at organizing because like labor movement and unionization stuff are the things that like big companies specifically are the most afraid about and like politicians also universally don't want people to be like the most informed about everything like they pretty much everybody's kind of got their own agenda. They're in somebody's pocket in most cases. Um, and the educated public is one of the more difficult things to control in terms of if they want big change, but like big change is scary to the economy and to businesses, then politicians are going to try to do what they can to slow that down as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. It's also, I think, the result of the pace of change is now so fast that
Hmm.
we as humans can no longer simply keep up. Politicians can't keep up. People just can't keep up. And so it's not, right or left. It's people in general get scared. They simply get scared
Hmm.
of the pace of change. And it's pace of change is happening now everywhere in every industry, and it's only accelerating. So you combine that with the threat of AI taking over the world, and autonomous robots, and science fiction becomes a reality, and people just scared. People are scared. We're talking, the point where you're gonna have kind of humanoids who are becoming better than humans, right?
Hmm.
Imagine having a vision better than 2020. Um, so the pace of change is just too fast for people to handle, And this mind shift, I think, is it's a tectonic mind shift for people.
Hmm.
You have like you need to embrace it and go with it, and if you don't, it's very hard. And people, it's very hard for people to adjust.
Yeah, adapting, especially like this is one of the things that like I've I started doing therapy in the past year, and my wife does therapy, and like we're regularly talking about like just generational trauma, and the fact that for the older a lot of the older generations, like they didn't have to learn more after like kind of getting their job. They settled, they got a house. There's no reason to learn more. And so like new information or things that kind of like upset what they had learned in school, and like were indoctrinated in, like Columbus Day, um the calling like slaves who were brought to the US, calling them like immigrants in some capacity. Like those are things that they're really that they're really not willing to kind of shift on. I mean, some of them are, which is great. But the generational resistance to change, I think, is definitely coming more to light because more needs to change, like faster and faster, because things are both catastrophically, like with the climate, like more impending, and then also with AI and technology, just like you need to keep up, otherwise uh the economy isn't it can carry you for only so long, with you choosing to be ignorant.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I think people have always dealt with change and always dealt with massive threats. If you look at Cold War, how people had to adjust and adapt to living under constant threat.
Hmm.
And I think change has always been the case. I mean, certainly the kind of the IT revolution that hit,
Hmm.
and even the revolution was the internet has hit and transformed the industries forever, very fairly quickly, I think. But I also reflect on this topic. Like change has always been there, right? I mean, from
Hmm.
industrial revolution to others, the change is always there.
the
And
only thing
I
that's
do
constant the only thing that's constant is that change.
right, right, right. But then at the same time, I think at least people could see things coming somehow, right? Like I feel like they were able to cope with change. But like we said 5 minutes ago, it's the pace of change of what's happening
Hmm.
that you can like. I feel like in the past, like okay, well, look, I need to get retrained and I'll be good for the next decade.
Hmm.
Okay, I need to get retrained, and then I'll have skills, and then I'll do like a couple more decades, and I can retire. But now it's all unpredictable, right?
Hmm.
What are you going to retire on? Where are you going to retire on? On what money? What is money? Right? What is dollar? Is dollar going to be around? Is it dollar? Is it euro? Is it euro? Is it yen? Or is it yuan? Like what? Like is it crypto? What am I doing? Like you like what do I do? Like
Am I gonna
what
have
do
to
you do?
retire on my Dogecoin?
Yeah, like what do you do? And then so all of a sudden it feels like even thinking about that, right, even thinking about that baggage that you need to think about of this uncertainty, I think is very taxing on people because
Hmm.
people need to have some stability somewhere, and you just can't find it, and I think it's really difficult for people.
Yeah, I was something I've like it's not a journey, but like one thing I'm trying to like learn how to do, because I'm trying to like get better at like content production and stuff, and also part of that is like the marketing of it. And so I'm trying to regularly post things on Facebook and Twitter, and I've never used Twitter before. And I'm like my wife, really, she prefers Twitter over Facebook, and so she was like explaining to me the appeal of Twitter and like how to use it and how to like uh how to get it, how to get the algorithm trained to your preferences. And I was just like, I don't like it, I don't like it, this is dumb, why am I having to learn this sucks. Like I can't imagine having to be like a grandma who's lived through like since World War II, trying to like pick up a smartphone and figure out how to do that. I'm like, I grew up in this. I don't want to use Twitter.
That's funny. So what are the top tips for training the algorithm?
um, like look up things that you like. Go through some of the memes. Find things that like make you giggle, or you make you actually want to like take time to like learn. Just like them. You don't have to repost everything, but it eventually like trains it. And then like things that people you follow, if you're kind of just sick of getting their news, you can just silence them. It doesn't unfollow them. But you're still like you can boost their numbers while also not getting flooded with shit that you don't care about. Um, I think those are two of the bigger ones. But also just like you kind of have to first search out the things that you like as opposed to like wait for them to come to you. Um,
Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
certainly makes sense. Yeah, my Twitter has I have completely destroyed my Twitter was the current
With all the
expensive war in Ukraine. I used to tweet about things blockchain, Ethereum related, and other things of curiosity, and now it's all just all the passion going in Twitter. And primarily, really, it's less for anybody else. It's for me to I'm almost using it to create a chronicle of my experience going through this war right now,
Mhm,
of things that I see and how I see it. So if I were to look at my Twitter feed now, I would be able to, I think, recall the feelings I had and kind of what the world has lived through.
mhm.
So for me, it's really capturing the timeline. Now it's like day 62 of where is this being recorded. So that it's like it's actually more for me than for anybody else, right? And
Mhm.
so in the process, sure, I'm gonna lose like followers. It's not like I have any followers anyway to speak of,
It's not like
you
it's your
know.
livelihood either. So.
Yeah, it's not like a livelihood either. But frankly, and like it could be livelihood, right? So I do reflect on that. People are gonna say like, oh well, this guy is really like
Mhm.
anti-Russian. It's like, yeah, like no shit. I am very much anti-Russia right now, and I have zero regrets, right? I mean, look at my handle. It's iFirebrand. Like Firebrand is a person who chooses to lit up fires when lighting up the fires is the right thing to do.
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing like Professor Clark, I believe his last name, who actually came up with kind of this proper definition for what is a firebrand.
Mhm.
Um, and Yeah, so for me, I have zero regrets of trashing my Twitter reputation if one looks at it that way,
Mhm.
because for me, it's a way to remember the world as it exists right now,
Mhm.
because this is the world events that are happening right now in Ukraine, and these are literal world events, not Ukrainian events.
Mhm.
They will have profound impact on, I think, this world for at least the next decade,
Yeah.
easily. For Ukraine, easily for the next 50, 60 years, 100%. But for the world in general, I think this is going to have most profound impact on uh, the Russian brand, as well as many other things of how people do business and how they trust or not trust different
Oh,
parties.
and I think one of the big things also is like this is I don't know how much of it a wake up call it is yet for people, but the whole dependence on oil and fossil fuels and stuff. The fact that so many countries like right now are still trying to like lift sanctions on Russia because they are so dependent on the oil and they don't want to like compromise their energy sectors. Um, and like why invest in renewable energy when you can you know go with something that's already there and is cheap and is destroying everything. But yeah, I've also been like doing like a bunch of like video journaling essentially. Um, like I made a YouTube channel a few years ago on on like the sheer notion of the name of the channel. It's just called Talking. Um, and right now there's only like 7 videos on it, and it's all just talking about like the Ukraine, the war and stuff. The first 2 videos I made in the 2 weeks leading up to the invasion. Um, and like one of the things I said was like because I've been seeing in like the expat groups in Ukraine, um, like, is it safe to come here? I bought a ticket. I'm gonna go see a concert. I'm like, no, this is not a fucking good time to visit. This is not a good time to visit. That was at the time. There was like 150,000 troops already on the all the borders,
Right.
and then also like right around that time there was a new strain of Delta, of Delta version. It's either Delta or Omicron, that was found in Ukraine, and like people are like, can I visit? Is it still fine to visit? And like the second video, I got a few comments, people saying like, oh, you're being inflammatory. You're saying like you're just trying to scare people. I'm like, no, it's a war coming, motherfuckers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? So your perspective was very sober, and some people in Ukraine obviously knew it was coming. Like Ukrainians knew, and
Hmm.
if you're reading kind of the information about the early days of the war, Ukrainian authorities purposefully did not want to tell people that it's coming because they needed to position their military equipment
Mm.
and soldiers at the proper positions to defend,
Yeah.
right? So they wanted to avoid naming specific date, even though they knew, on to prevent the panic. Because we saw what happened in Kiev when the missiles started hitting. The gridlock happened in 3 hours as my family was leaving, and so it was kind of writing on the wall of what was happening and why it's happening, and yeah, and some people, some Ukrainians were in disbelief. Even the numbers got to 200,000, I was like, guys, like it's happening, and people just would not. Some people were like, yeah, possibly, very likely. Others were like, what are you talking about? Germany just invested $70 million.
Are you saying Ukrainians in Ukraine or Ukrainians in the U.S.?
I'm talking about Ukrainians in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even the Ukrainians in Ukraine, like for many, it was like disbelief, right? It's like they're like, oh, like they'll do whatever, but they're gonna invade. And frankly, when Putin had like a couple of years ago 50, 60,000 troops close to the border, whereas Belarus people were like, I'm not sure, but that's not enough to invade, right? But 200,000, as we have clearly seen, is enough to start an invasion.
It's enough to start an invasion, but not enough to actually accomplish anything.
Well, you can actually accomplish quite a bit. You can take the whole country in with 200,000 troops if the country is willing to get conquered.
Yeah.
Ukraine is not willing to get conquered, right? As we have seen, is every village, everywhere you go, even in occupied territories, people are offering resistance. They are not
firebombing tanks.
They're bombing tanks. I mean, look, my family, they are relatively safe south of Kiev, but guess what? They have Molotov cocktails.
Are they still there?
Oh yeah, they're all still there. Yeah, they're all still there. All still there. They have they're contributing to, there's checkpoints, there's stashes of Molotov cocktails along the routes. There's official checkpoints, there's non-official checkpoints. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening from territorial self-defense, and it means people are prepared to resist, right? And I mentioned to a lot of my friends back in when I visited Ukraine in probably 2015.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, when was the last time you visited? You were in Ukraine.
Well, so last time, it was last year I visited, but back in 2014 after
the actual start of the war.
Yeah, so I remember kind of being worried for my family. I said, look, if Russian tanks come to Kiev, you guys, like, you need to go to Poland. And they're like, we're going nowhere. They're like, Russians will bleed in these streets, like Kiev. And they were like, no, guys, like, you should go because you just should. And like, no, we're going nowhere. And they're like, I'll go like territorial defense. I'll do this. I do this. And so, people were ready to fight back then. And just kind of the mindset is really, it's really something, because being a kind of an Americanized Ukrainian, or maybe just humans are different. It's hard for me to comprehend that people would just say, you know what, I'm going to stand my ground. This is my land. It's like, it's just the land. Just give it up. No, like, Ukrainians know if you give up, it's death. It's easy for me to say this, comfortable sitting in the United States and snowing behind me. But, it's a completely different situation if you are in Ukraine and you will die if you lose this fight, right? And you see what's happening in the East Ukraine. They have filtration camps, like during Nazi times. They have concentration camps now. And then they go execute Ukrainians because they're Ukrainians. So they know, like, you have no choice. You have to fight. Yeah.
I was like, they found all like the filtration camps along the Donbass. I know Mariupol, there was like some 30,000 and possibly more, like, people that were forcibly deported towards Russia. Yeah, it's a messy situation. Like, especially from Lviv. I'm also, in the relatively safe area. I still get like air raid sirens and stuff. But the people here are also like, they're collecting bottles from like all the bars to make Molotov cocktails. There are places all over the city where they're making like camouflage nets. My wife actually started making one here. It'd take forever to make, but like, we started making one.
Yeah. No, I hear the story certainly, and Yeah, it's like everybody's helping. I think kind of we started this conversation by saying, okay, the 200,000 troops. Well, you can't. Yeah, you can invade, but you can't hold,
Hmm.
right? No matter what kind of torture and other things people do, and people wonder like, well, why? Why Ukrainians are doing this? Well, it's Ukraine's been at war for the past 8 years,
Yep.
right? So the people who are not careful with their words, like this Russian journalist who was writing a thing for like I don't know CoinDesk saying like oh we're starting like oh in like 2 months ago,
Hmm.
right in February. It's like no, it started 8 years ago, right
Yeah.
in 2014. So it was that the war has been going on constantly, and like you also asked me when was the last time I was in Ukraine. Last time was just last year, but even I've been going back at least once a year. Bring my kids, and often you don't see the war like with the Iraqi war in the United States. You don't feel it if
Yeah.
you're in a
Yeah.
safe place, but on the front line, like bullets were flying.
This is one of the things actually my wife. So my wife is like she's like filled me in very much with like kind of the politics that's been going on since 2014. And she's really like big on like the previous president Poroshenko. But like one of her criticisms of his administration was like as much as he did to like rebuild the Ukrainian military and strengthen relationships with Europe, like one of the things that he didn't really he didn't telegraph well enough to like Ukrainians was that there is still a war going on. We're winning, but like Russia is still a threat. Um, and now like with Zelensky, like I I I, I can appreciate that he hasn't fled, but he like leading up to the invasion was not like any sort of leading force in actually like defending and reassuring people that like everything is going to be okay. But I think one of the things that to your point of like people saying we're gonna fight, that like if he were to capitulate to do any sort of like really shitty like peace negotiation, or if he left the country, I don't think anybody would give a shit. I think people would like fight to the bitter end everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good observation. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Like Ukrainians, maybe 20 years ago, Ukrainians would be like, well, we're not sure because there's this kind of confusion. Like 20 years ago, people were like, well, maybe like population was like split.
Hmm.
Maybe we should be closer to Russia. Maybe we should not be closer to Russia. And then Russia takes
Hmm.
Crimea, invades, takes Donbass. And then Ukrainians like, well, what the hell is this? Right? And then Russians keep killing Ukrainians, keep trying to choke it with all kinds of like economic things, economic threats and otherwise. And then Ukraine's like, well, what the hell is this? So over the past 8 years, it's kind of Russian has been losing the the popular vote. Not to
Hmm.
say they were ever popular, but there were certainly some people were kind of either indifferent or they were maybe more balanced, not sure, especially out in the East.
Hmm.
And now, right, and now was what happened. I mean, if you think about it, like if you were, I don't know what Putin was thinking, obviously. I mean, I know exactly what he's thinking, but what he did, if you wanted to kind of execute on his strategy of trying to get kind of the East to be like, oh no, go with us. I mean,
Hmm.
he should have attacked West. He should have attacked the city where you at. He
Hmm.
should have attacked, Ivano-Frankivsk, right? And then maybe the East would be like, oh, like maybe like oh,
Maybe we
there's no
could
war.
take their side because like we
Yeah,
also
so
don't
there's
agree with
that.
them anyways.
Yeah, but now what he's done, he under disguise of uh, preserving the lives of Russian speaking population,
And getting
he
rid of Nazis.
yeah, of course. Well, yeah, Nazis, of course. Under the guise of protecting Russian-speaking population, he is actually cleansing Russian population, right?
Hmm.
And like, mind you, by the way, like in the story I started a couple of minutes ago about in 2014 around the dinner table when I was telling my family to be ready to go to Poland, the people who are saying that they should be going to um, they would be fighting Russians were actually my step sisters and my brothers-in-laws and my stepsisters and my stepmother were ethnic Russians,
Hmm.
right? They're ethnic Russians. So like my family, I mean step family, but they're still my family and speaking they're like my close to me.
Hmm.
They're ethnic Russians. They're Ukrainians, but they're ethnic Russians. They have family in Russia. As a matter of fact, they even speak to people. Their distant relatives in Russia right now, and they're trying to explain to them what's happening here. And believe it or not, the relatives who have visited Ukraine just 2 years ago for like a funeral, they're like, they're telling them right now, they're like, no, you need to come to Russia. You gotta be safe. You gotta be saved because with
Hmm.
Zelensky, he will get you. Like you gotta escape while you still can. These are people in Russia. These are normal people. What you think are normal people, right? And this is not an anecdotal example. This is a consistent example of
Yeah,
how people are acting in
I
Russia.
believe Putin is still like 70-80% popular uh,
Yeah.
among like the average Russian citizen. My wife's husband, like, that's me. My wife's
Yeah.
dad.
By the way, I'd like to inform you, sir, that
My wife's dad is also very much like he's into like the Russian Kool-Aid. And like my wife and her sister had to like completely like cut him off. Like they can no longer talk with him because he says like, oh, they stole his Ukraine. It's like, what what do you mean by that? You mean like Russia? You're talking about Russian Ukraine. Um, but I mean, so my wife's grandma, she's still stuck in her hometown, which is currently one of the occupied areas in the southeast in Berdyansk. And like one of the things that's really interesting, like they get often their connections are really spotty, they're on and off, but well, my wife still talks with her grandma pretty regularly, and I'm in contact with. I stayed there briefly, and me and my wife took salsa and bachata lessons there, and our dance instructor and his wife are still there and like trying to resist everything do everything they can. There used to be like daily marches showing Ukrainian solidarity, but I think those were all banned. But like this whole the city also, because it's in the southeast, is very like pro Russian, generally kind of like pro Russian. But even like the most like pro Russian cities, including like Odessa and Kharkiv, like these are places that all Russians would constantly be going to, and the people there never believed that like Russians would attack them. Like everybody is now completely united behind the Russians go fuck yourself mindset.
yep. Yeah, I would certainly challenge your statement of saying that Odessa and Kharkiv are pro-Russian
I know. I think
cities.
it's less that they were pro-Russian and more that they were like Russia friendly in terms of like tourism and like citizenship and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very much so. I think they were Russian friendly. There were certainly more Russian speakers in the East. There's no question about that.
I mean, Kyiv
Uh,
also like they primarily speak Russian. I think Lviv is like one of the few actually one of the few Ukrainian cities that like the larger population actually speaks Ukrainian.
well, I think in Kiev, the whole population speaks Ukrainian. It just they choose to speak Russian
Yeah,
often.
that's what I meant.
But I wouldn't say large. I mean, I have observed this shift over the past, I would say, decade really.
Hmm.
The Kiev has become more and more Ukrainian speaking, and frankly, I would say over the past, I would say 6, 7 years, I would hear Ukrainian more and more and more in Kiev.
Hmm.
Again, to case in point, my relatives, like ethnic Russians, who never spoke Ukrainian in their life, they're switching to Ukrainian language. They have been speaking by choice. Like nobody's making them do it.
Hmm.
They choose to speak Ukrainian to me, to others in the street, to each other to speak Russian because it's more convenient. It's harder for them. Certainly,
Hmm.
it's a different language, so it's harder. But there's a lot of that, right? So I think I would like stereotypical people say like yes, we will speak Russian in Kiev, but I don't think this is no longer like the norm, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I hear a lot of Ukrainian. Depends on the context, honestly. Depends on your interactions. Um, so I can't. I mean, I don't have statistics, honestly, to tell you exactly, but the tide is turning. I mean, even anecdotal, I can tell you some of the earlier
I mean,
videos from the war in Kiev. Like this guy like reflected me. He was like shooting a gun. He was like firefight ongoing, and then he was like yelling out. He was just like, I'm gonna, he's like, once this war is over, I'm gonna quit speaking this goddamn Russian language. I'm gonna learn Ukrainian. Blah. I think I was like speaking pure Russian, right? He just like
uh-huh.
he was speaking angry Russians. He was like, I'm abandoning this language. I'm
Mhm.
abandoning this language. So anyway,
I mean, like definitely since like 2014, 20 like Maidan revolution, the like the feeling of nationalism and like the active decision to like not be Russian, not necessarily just like become more European, but specifically to not be Russian, I think has grown way more as part of like a universal part of like the Ukrainian identity.
Yeah, I think it's being European. I think what Ukrainians have been realizing over the past 15 years is that they are can you do self-reflection. You do self-reflection, and
Mm-hmm.
then you think, well, where do I belong in this world? And you see how Europe is evolving. You see how Russia is evolving. Now it's been 30 years since independence, right? And the first decade, people like, well, hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Economic reforms isn't going, uh, inflation's out of control. Oh, like changing from communism to capitalism society is just difficult. And then the second decade goes by, and then you see what Russia's doing, you see what Europe's doing. You see the quality of life in Europe, you see quality of life in Russia. And so during that second decade, I think Ukrainians were doing this really active reflection
Mm-hmm.
of where we're going to go. And towards the end of that decade, so 20 years after revolution, I think Ukrainians as a nation uh, aspired and told their leaders that we've been thinking and I want to be part of European Union.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why in 2014, when finally been working and becoming part of European Union and being the Europeans that they are, they have kind of filed the paperwork with European Union, right? Everything's ready to go. And then President Yanukovych was like, got a call from Putin, and Putin was like, don't sign it. And Yanukovych was like, okay. And then Ukraine was like, that's not okay. Like, you're representing the will of the people.
Mm-hmm.
You're not here to make the shots. And the guy's like, I'm your president. And he's like, the hell you are. Right. And so the protest started. I mean, the protest started because they started beating the students up. And I mean,
Yeah.
that was the spark. But really, the reason so many people came out is because the guy refused to sign a membership agreement
Mm-hmm.
to apply for European Union. And so he got kicked out. So Ukrainians have made this choice 20 years ago to be European nation, and this is why in 2014 hundreds of demonstrators died right on the streets, get killed by Russian sniper fire, as far as we know, or special services from Russia, or Ukrainian special services under direction of Putin, and Ukrainians are willing to pay the price because they want to be a European nation because they are Europeans, and that's what distinguishes Russians from Ukrainians. There's no this conversation of brotherhood. Yeah, geography, borders change, sure, but it's like your moral compass of Ukrainians is in Europe
Mm-hmm.
versus moral compass of Russians is in Russia.
I think this is a documentary that I watched while I was in China with my wife. Uh, it's not like just it's not like a replay of the thing. It's like an actual like it's got actual footage. So if anybody's got Netflix and they want to learn a little bit more of like the Ukrainian revolution in 2014, Winter on Fire, excellent documentary.
Yeah, I agree. I know about I would say not a large number, but certain people who were interviewed for the interview. I have worked with them personally, in some cases directly, some cases indirectly, as part of the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ruslana, for example, one of the singers, Ukrainian singers who was active during Maidan. Like I worked with her when she was visiting DC, trying to lobby for support here. A number of other politicians as well. So certainly have been contributing to
Yeah, that's one thing
the
I wanted to ask about. So you helped push forward, I guess, the Ukraine Freedom Support Act, um, petitioning the U.S. government to support Ukraine, uh, like to be like independent and self-sovereign and everything.
Yeah, there was a what I would call the capstone project of the work we've done over the course of the year. Back when this revolution started, the revolution of dignity, there was a lot of similar work that's happening. Was happening then. It's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily by volunteers. So there's a lot of work, a lot of help is being done right now, of course, by governments and Ukrainian government, but it's also a really large contingent of volunteers, both providing the support and help for the military as well as the territorial defense forces, all done by volunteers, as well as other kind of informational campaigns. So back to the 2014, there was an opportunity to support Ukraine in a really massive way. And
Hmm.
what do I mean by massive? Massive means 250 million to 300 million dollars in support. Both, I believe, it was that time it was non-lethal weapons,
Hmm.
and while we volunteers were doing bake sales and other things, raising money, we got a call from this guy in high school. He was working for one of the congressmen, literally a guy in 12th grade. And he's
Hmm.
like, hey guys, just want to reach out to you on Facebook. There's this bill that was drafted, but we need need constituents to lobby for it to pass it through, get additional co-sponsors and things like that.
Hmm.
And first we're like, is this a joke? But hey, like, there's a revolution,
Yeah,
like Ukrainians that take to Crimea, like it's worth it, right? We got to figure out
hmm.
because there we are trying to raise funds to get GPS navigators for Ukrainian pilots, so they
Hmm.
don't fly in paper maps in their MiGs. It was that disarray of a state. And so yeah, we met with the guy, and the guy's like, yeah, like I'll arrange you. Like, here's Congressman, blah blah blah, and we're like, this is real. Like, let's do it. So we set an agenda of like, ask the guy again, high school guy. It's like, what do we do, right? And he's like, well, here's the plan. You got to get more co-signers. Like, we got a version of the bill in Senate. Then we gotta vote there. We gotta vote there. And in essence, in 30 days, we were able to lobby the Congress, fight Russian propaganda, fight Russian lobbying groups who were doing all this. And it was a team effort. It was only just, I would say, 10 volunteers, including
Hmm.
me, who are actively working this on a daily basis, figuring out how to do this, strategizing Twitter storms, lobbying, going to the Congress, talking to Congress people, trying to work with ambassadors. And at that time, we felt really abandoned by like Ukrainian politicians, by Ukrainian embassy. It wasn't clear to the pro-Russian. There was no traction. There was just no interest. So,
Hmm.
even these like legacy Ukrainian organizations, like Ukrainian Congress of was it or U.S. Ukrainian Congress of Diaspora, like it just felt like this legacy nonsense organizations that
Like they
just
were
like
only there in name.
yeah, just stale. We're like, are you lobbying or what are you doing? Like, they're like, hey, like, slow down. Don't be so bold. Like, there's a protocol. We're like, are you out of your mind? There's
Hmm.
a war going on, right? The Russians invaded. There's money sitting there. You're doing nothing. We're gonna do something. And so we upset a lot of people. A lot of people were really upset. The diplomats were upset. Embassy was upset. But then like we start making traction, and so they're like, crap, they're making traction. So like let's meet with them. So like we
How
talked to
can we jump
ambassador.
on this?
Yeah, and so the ambassador would be like, he was like, I'm glad you got attention of congressmen, but he was scolding us about like there's a proper way of doing things. I was like, I firebrand. I was like, I don't give a shit. Like,
Hmm.
I
The
have an
way
objective.
you're doing things is not working.
Yeah, I was like, there's $250 million to $300 million in the package that like lethal and non-lethal weapons, and that would actually authorize. That's what enabled Ukraine to get javelins. Like that bill. That bill is what enabled javelins to continue being supplied to Ukraine. Like that, our work there. And so I was like, we're doing it. Like we're doing it. And so yeah, kind of long story short, kind of the anecdotal example that I tell everybody here is like the power of one person of make some contribution is just me going last day in Congress where we had to pass the bill. It was 2014, I believe. Boehner was Speaker of the House, and we had to bring that bill out for the vote. If we did not, then the Congress would go like end of session, right? Then you have to like go to next year,
Yeah.
start lobbying process again. So, and at that time, we had a version of the bill that's ready. Like the Senate passed that day. The Senate's like, yep, we're good, right? Like we voted for the Freedom Support Act, and so House of Representatives had to do the same. And I literally had to go in and knock on doors at like 6 p.m. last day and like beg the Boehner to bring the bill out for the vote. And the whole story is murky how it all ended. But like 11 o'clock when they're done negotiating for their budget, like they used some procedure to bring while everybody was in session. They brought in some procedure to like rapidly vote on this bill, and it got passed. Right, like they voted for it, and so then Obama 2 weeks later signed as a law. Right, and like that was it. So anyway, so like I am in grand scheme of things an absolute nobody, But drop in the ocean with a bunch of other volunteers, we made like all the difference in the world for people. We got
Hmm.
massive package that really enabled us to do like get javelins to Ukraine. At least they get the war going to get javelins to Ukraine in the first batch.
Did that also eventually? I imagine that also like eventually led to a lot of the military partnerships and the cooperative trainings with the Ukrainian
In essence,
military.
the money was spent on. That's right. Yeah. So the money was for like the non-lethal aid was specifically for this training as well,
Hmm.
to get Ukraine what they needed kind of in the immediate future, and the training as well as just the money for like getting getting defense related training and equipment.
So what were you
So,
doing?
go ahead.
What were you doing at the time for like work? Like, so you're volunteering here, but was that on the side, or were you like primarily working with like a non for profit or something?
Totally on the side. No, that was completely on the side. Uh, just had my day job, uh, you know, and this was all nights and weekends, for like years straight. I probably booked maybe 600 hours, nights and weekends work during that year, from
Damn.
fighting Russian propaganda to doing all kinds of Twitter storms. Like all the weekends, all the nights was just that. It's,
Hmm.
it's all we did, all we did, um, because that was the right thing to do. It was, like you cannot see a revolution happening and do nothing about it, just like you cannot see the war happening and do nothing about it right now.
Hmm.
Same thing, right? And at that time, we knew that if we didn't fight, we'd be oppressed under Russia.
Hmm.
And you're gonna, so we'll give you an example where that has happened. Sure, Belarus. Belarus had a similar Maidan revolution, attempted revolution 6 months ago. Was it
Yep.
7, 9 months ago? And so this
Within
is
this
what
past year,
happens. This is what
Lukashenko is
happens
still
if
there, and that's where his military is, and they're forced to set the fire into a country that they have actually no beef with. I think
yep.
I think like 80% of their hospitals, or it's either 80% of their hospitals or 80% of their like their blood supplies are being exhausted because they're being used specifically for Russian soldiers, and it's
Right.
like, fuck your citizenry, I guess, because you've got Putin's cock in your mouth.
Well, right, and it's like what's happening now. It's like Putin is not going to get Ukraine, but he's now going to get Belarus.
Hmm.
It's very sad for the people of Belarus. By the way, I learned should not be called Belarusian. They're people of Belarus,
Hmm.
and it's sad. But this is what happens when you give up the fight or you don't get rid of the dictator.
Hmm. Yeah. So, in terms of like kind of what's going on today, what so you are working in Consensus doing NFTs, but I also know like just looking through your LinkedIn, you've got like an NFT for supporting UA. So UA NFT.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the project. So uanft.org is a site I launched with another Consensus colleague. This was like a 10 to 12 hour project. This came as a result of kind of initial shock from the war. I think the first 48 hours, I was focused on getting my family into safe location
Hmm.
and making sure they're out where they need to be, and then I was like, we gotta start. Like, where do you start? Like, where do you start when the war starts, right? Like, where do you help? Where do you
Hmm.
support? And of course, the first answer is money, right? You gotta help money. You gotta get equipment. Who do you work with? Okay, who's on the ground? And so the further organization that's on the ground, something called Come Back Alive,
Yep.
Back Alive, and it's a reputable organization. And I thought, okay, so fine, I donate. Who cares? But what can other people do? And then it was at the time where I think 24 hours earlier there was, or maybe 48 hours earlier, there was this incident of a Ukrainian ship being, or was a Russian ship approaching a Ukrainian island and then threatening to do an attack. And this infamous phrase, which is also in your T-shirt, yeah, which says that Russian warship, yeah, right, Russian warship,
Go
fuck off.
fuck yourself.
Exactly. And so and there's like another video there, and so I was like, man, let me just create an NFT out of this, and then maybe I can sell this, right? And it just captured like this thing, this, and I translated. This is my translation in this
Hmm.
NFT. This is my, like, I took a publicly available image. I did the movement on the image. I did a translation for it and timing and captions, and then I wanted to capture it, kind of this moment where it says like, when this like, let's tell them to fuck off, yeah, just in case, and then it's like, and then we go like, Russian worship, go fuck yourself. And it felt like such a spirit of Ukrainians, of what they are and who they are, that became such a rallying call, right, for what to do and how you deal with an oppressor, a Russian invasion. So anyway, so that was my little project. I need to update the site. I need to note that many of the people who were on the island were taken prisoners that were since recovered,
Yep.
which is fantastic news. Um, but again, because I'm focused on other activities, I have not been able to make the changes just yet. But I will certainly make time to do
Also,
that.
one thing that's
But
cool that
anyway,
the
that
the
was that was.
NFT the NFT
Go
looks
ahead.
like this when you get it, because I bought one because it looked cool.
Oh, nice, awesome. Well, thanks for support.
I mean,
Uh,
thank you
the,
for
the,
supporting Ukraine.
I mean, like, jokes aside, $30, $30 NFT, right? It goes every time I see Back Alive Twitter feed showing that they bought yet another camera or night vision goggles or um, IT equipment for the drones
Mhm.
to do observations over Mariupol right now, so they can counter Russian attacks. I mean, that's where it's at.
Yeah, that's
You
one
know
of
that.
the nice things about like so Come Back Alive. They've got like a open reporting of all of their financial statements, and also I think it's either daily or like every other day they do like a full like podcast just talking with like supporters and like these are the things that we bought, these are the things that we need, giving updates on the war and stuff. So it's good shit. Come Back Alive. Uh, the original website was savelife.in.ua, but they made a comebackalive.in.ua. And that organization was also started right near the beginning of the war back in 2014. Also, uh,
Right.
by like a guy who's just like, we don't have, because everybody like the military was at the time still being like supported by just like people getting together boots, finding camouflage things that look like camouflage and sending it to them. They were like supplying their own rifles, they were supplying like just cooking their own food, and this guy just made this organization. I don't remember what his original like work was, but like he's since like converted it into like this now notorious, famously supported charity. And I have one more thing to say, but I forgot about it. So yeah.
Well, and so okay, to take a point, like back in 2014 when we're doing kind of year of volunteering there, like that's exactly what we did as volunteers, and it's still happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Of the Ukrainian army was ill-equipped, right? And we can by Russian purpose. Like Russians did not want to have a strong Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
because in case they ever needed to invade Ukraine, they don't want Ukrainians to fight back, right? So they had World War II bullets, they had World War II helmets that were just a joke. People would, and the number one cause of death for Ukrainians were bleeding out on the battlefield,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like in the fights in Donetsk. Uh, and so like one of the trip I did, the first trip I did after the revolution was actually getting a bag full of Celux. Celux is a chemical that it's like a tourniquet kind of thing where it's a packet anti clogging. It's like a clogging thing.
Uh-huh.
So where you like imagine like hand warmers, right? Like people familiar with. Imagine opening the packet, it gets activated, and you shove it into your wound, and that clots the bleeding. So you buy yourself, let's say, half an hour or an hour of time, so you don't bleed out in the battlefield. You go out. So Ukrainian military had none of that. So would buy hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of packs here in U.S. and then would have volunteers like go like me, right? I had
Mm-hmm.
to go in. So like one of the trips I did, I had like hundreds of uh, Celux packages. I had uh, two pairs of boots actually going to the people fighting for the Donetsk airport. Like literally, were like these boots, like this is the size, these are the soldiers' feet, and we got to carry to the soldiers at the Donetsk airport, as well as a bunch of other things
That
like
actually, real fast, that there's another thing that's like I recommend for people. Kiborgi or Cyborgs Heroes Never Die. It's a movie about the soldiers fighting at Donetsk airport. Um, they all died unfortunately, but this is like it's a movie that's all about how these guys with like very little equipment. I don't remember how long they lasted, but they lasted way longer than any like ill-equipped unit uh, should be able to resist like a fully equipped the fully equipped Russian army at the time.
yeah, I think that it was like 80 some days, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like these are the people who got the boots, and probably other stuff. The movie is good. I wish they released this movie with just English subtitles instead of dub in English. It's like it does not fully convey the
I think I
emotional
I think I
story.
watched it with subs. I don't remember where though.
If you could find the link and post it, I would greatly appreciate it because that movie is excellent, and you don't really need like subtitles have been done better, I think, versus
Hmm.
translation. But yeah, good movie certainly. I watched the movie. I think it was actually presented. It was never in American movie theaters for I think obvious reasons of popularity,
Hmm.
but it was presented in a very small theaters because like Library of Congress did a screening. I met the director, talked to people there, so it was I think it's a very powerful movie. Kind of represents the spirit of Ukrainians that I think is
Hmm.
still relevant now, kind of in this war that's continuing.
Yeah, I think just like also one of the things that I've had to come to term with is like understanding war and kind of like what the purpose of it, and because there are so many groups right now where it's just like we want the war to end. There doesn't need to be a winner, there doesn't need to be a loser. There's no good guy, there's no bad guy. Especially like religious groups too. I'm kind of beefing with that. But like the whole thing where uh war is senseless and there's no point to it, and there's like it's all contrived. Like no, there are real actual consequences that like not just on the people but like on the entire world. And I'm also from the States, and all of the wars that we've been fighting have been in somebody else's land, but it's an entirely different thing when the war is in your country.
Yeah, and kind of the few minutes we have left to
Yeah.
to conclude this, that's really interesting point, and I reflect on this question as well. It's like, oh, it's just a war. It's like, well, in case of Ukraine, I think this is different than every other war that we can think of. Maybe World War II would be the same category, but this is existential war. This
Hmm.
is not like, oh, it's a war over disputed region. Oh, it's a war over national resource. No, it's existential war where Russia simply wants to kill Ukrainians because they're Ukrainians. This is no different than Nazis wanting to kill Jews because they're Jews. There's no other reason. No other
Hmm.
reason. It's like it's right. It's not like, oh, like just give up and you'll live peacefully. No, like if that was the case, they would not have leveled Mariupol, city of 300,000 people, right, just to the ground. They would not have completely annihilated everything around. Just, I mean, this is scorched earth tactics.
Hmm.
Their goal is
They wouldn't be awarding
not to
the people
hold.
who they wouldn't be awarding the people like from who were fighting in
Right,
Bucha.
right, right, exactly. So it's like this isn't just a war. I mean, this is true genocide. This is Holocaust 2.0 done by Hitler 2.0. It's as simple as that. If you're being killed because you're Ukrainian, that's it. You're being raped because you're Ukrainian. You like we're not gonna follow any rules of war whatsoever because we don't need to. We're Russian,
And
and
we
that's
don't
that's a
believe you're a
problem.
country or you exist.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, let's give up and then like let Russia just control us. It's if you give up, you get sent to concentration camps in Siberia. Like Putin already has plans for camps in far east to deport Ukrainians, just like he deported, not he, but Stalin deported. Same thing, really. Stalin,
Yeah.
Hitler, and Putin deported Crimean Tatars, native population of Crimea, uh, out to the east, right? And they couldn't come back only until the 80s to resettle back in Crimea, which
Hmm.
is really their land. So it's the same situation happening. So as the saying goes, and that's a message to all the religious groups and others who say, just give me peace. Like if Russia stops fighting, there will be peace. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine.
Yeah. And on that happy note, Constantine, thank you very much for all of the work that you've done for Ukraine. Also, thank you for being a guest on the Mochi Podcast, dude.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for doing this, Robin. Thank you for spreading the word, and thank you for staying in Ukraine and helping Ukraine win this war. Appreciate it.
Doing what I can, dude. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
All right. It's been our Mochi Podcast, episode 25. Adios.